You've already gone over in other parts of the course. So then I'll tie those all back. Okay. Today, we're going to go over one of the most important concepts and models in the entire science of economics. And it's called the perfect price competition model. The perfect price competition model. Now, if you make a note to yourself, go back to Menger chapter 5 in your notes. The auction model. Remember the auction model? Menger goes over that. We went over it in class. You had a test question over the auction model. A couple of test questions on the auction model. You'll notice if you go back in your notes, scroll back, look at Menger chapter 5, theory of price, the auction model. Then there were 4 implications of Menger's auction model. And the fourth one, if you'll notice in your notes, I'd be looking at your notes, it's how you tie these things together. As more parties enter the exchange setting ceteris paribus, the limits of price formation are progressively narrowed. I told you, put in parentheses, bargaining is eliminated in the perfect price competition model. And I said, put stars and asterisks, get your attention. I said, you'll be exposed to this after, another exam or so. 4 or 5 weeks down the road, we're going to go through this. Guess what? Here we are now. This will help you understand that connection. Now, the perfect price competition model was completely formalized by a great economist named Frank Knight at the University of Chicago in 1921. And as a graduate student finishing his PhD, his dissertation became a book called Risk, Uncertainty, and Profit. One of probably the 10 greatest economics books of the 20th century. And it really catapulted him into fame. He later became the chairman of the Department of Economics at the University of Chicago and trained so many Nobel Prize winners. Unbelievable how many came out under the direction of Frank Knight. So we're going to go through Knight's contribution and how he's going to modify and change some of what you did in Menger. Now, when you think about Menger's auction model, there was a range of equilibrium prices that can clear the market, wasn't there? Right? He said between this price and that price, the market was clear. Supply was demand. And of course, notice that Menger had no graphs. Frank Knight's going to allow us to draw graphs. He's going to change this model. He's going to give us some more extra assumptions. So we always start with assumptions. And here are the 6 assumptions of the perfect price competition model. And I'm going to be testing you over this on your 3rd exam in a couple of weeks. Number 1, large numbers of buyers and sellers. Large numbers of buyers and sellers. Now I want you to think back just on this very first assumption. When we did the auction model of horses, what do we have? Like 7 sellers and 4 buyers. Remember that? We had this range of indeterminacy on what the equilibrium price would be at the margin. Well, Frank Knight says, now let's assume we have large numbers of buyers and sellers. That's number 1. Number 2, free entry, free exit. Free entry, free exit. In other words, free entry means anybody can enter that industry. Anybody can come in the market. Free exit means anybody can leave. You don't have to stay in that industry. Free entry, free exit. Very important. Number 3, everyone is a price taker. Everyone is a price taker. The market sets the price. Everyone is a price taker. The market sets the price. So we always like to say price is parametric and given to the individual firm. Number 4, we're going to go through all these. Number 4, perfect and costless information. Perfect and costless information. So information is not scarce. free goods. Number 5, perfect and costless mobility of all resource inputs and outputs. Perfect and costless mobility of all resource inputs and outputs. In parentheses, you can put 0 transactions cost. That helps. 0 transactions cost. And number 6, homogeneous goods. Homogeneous goods, which means like goods. Heterogeneous goods would be different goods, right? So homogeneous good is like a bushel of wheat, bushel of wheat, bushel of wheat. Heterogeneous goods is a bushel of wheat's not a computer. They're different goods. It serve different needs. So now let's start with a little bit of this. And the first thing is, which assumption did Ronald Coase say, if this assumption is not holding true, then we get a theory of the firm? It was something on that list that you're going to be tested over on Wednesday. What did Coase say is real? Transactions cost. He says, what if there are real transactions cost because of scarcity? Then the price system doesn't allocate for scarce resources. The boss does inside the firm, right? That's his whole theory of the firm. Now, he won the Nobel Prize for that essay, and he wrote that essay in 1937. That was 16 years after Frank Knight published Risk, Uncertainty, and Profit, which he formalized this law of the perfect price competition. Now, you may look at some of these assumptions, and people look at them, and they say, well, these don't look realistic. They're not descriptively realistic. Are you with me? Well, they're not supposed to be realistic, right? No more than road maps look like reality. They actually don't look like reality. 1 inch is not 100 miles. 1 inch is 1 inch. Are you with me so far? In fact, descriptive realism of assumptions is not the test of whether a scientific theory is valid or not. People that want descriptively realistic assumptions usually do not understand what science is. See, science is about conjectures and refutations. That's what Karl Popper once taught us in philosophy of science. You make a hypothesis, formulate a hypothesis, and then what do? You go test it. You try and refute it. Try to disprove it. And if you can't disprove it, after repeated trials of different types of tests on it, then you just assume it is true. You never really prove truth in that regard. You just make the assumption, and under every time we keep trying to refute it, we can't seem to refute it. Are you with me? So it's about conjectures, kind of hypothesis, and you're trying to test that hypothesis. Science must be tested. Well, it's not science, it's poetry. And descriptive realism, when students go, I want a theory that describes reality and its assumptions, I'm like, you really don't want science in there, because that has nothing to do about the testing of validity of the scientific proposition. We're trying to isolate cause and effect, and we're going to test it. Let me just give you an example. We know that the Earth rotates, it goes around the sun, we know that. Now, we form a conjecture, hypothesis about that, didn't we? Copernicus did. And it seems to be tested every day. We haven't really proven that's always going to be the case. Why is it? Is it theoretically imaginable that the sun might rotate around Earth? Well, it's imaginable, it's not probable, right? It's like every time we test it, damn it, the sun comes up in the east because the Earth is rotating and we're around the sun. So we just say, well, assume that always will be true. Well, it's an assumption, and it's a good assumption. Why? Because we've never seen it refuted. The sun has not risen in the west. The sun has never gone around the Earth. at least as far as we can tell. So we say it's a good assumption. It's true that we go around this, not that. Okay. Descriptive realism tells you nothing about whether a scientific proposition is correct. 1 inch on a road map is not 100 miles. And that's exactly why that's useful. Get you to your destination. Because you take the complexity of the real world and you reduce it to a very simplified form. So you can navigate the reality to get to where you're trying to get at. The goal. The goal is truth in science. Now here's what Frank Knight's going to do. He's going to get us to that. It's called the perfect price competition model. We've got 6 assumptions. And what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is relaxing each of these assumptions. Coase relaxed one and won the Nobel Prize. We're going to relax virtually every single one of these as we go through the rest of this course to give us more explanatory time for application. Now, when we get to monopoly theory, we're going to relax the second assumption, free entry, free exit. What happens if the market isn't free to enter? You have barriers to entry, well, that's going to be monopoly. Will that change the price? Oh yes, that will change the market price, right? We're going to do that. What happens if information's scarce and it's its own economic good, not free? Oh, that has massive implications for institutions and so forth. And we're going to apply this all to your life. We're going to relax each one of these. Okay, so let's first start with the model. As Frank Knight teaches us, when those 6 assumptions, if you for the moment assume they're all true, you end up with this situation. There's a separation between the firm and the industry and the industry. So you have the industry or the market over here, and you've got the firm in the market. So he says, now let's separate these 2 things out. Now, the first thing to understand is, we're going to go back to Farmer Jones. When you think about Farmer Jones, growing wheat. Now, he's growing a commodity where there's hundreds of thousands of wheat farmers out there growing what? Homogeneous goods. They're all growing the same identical thing, wheat. And let's say the market price right here is $5. So for the firm, this is an infinitely or perfectly elastic demand curve facing the individual seller in that industry. Are you with me? And we did this in elasticity. We did this with elasticity. And I said we always use the wheat model, and we're going to talk about that today, because this is what this seems to apply to. Now, the demand curve is all the market will bear. And if you're a farmer, let's say in Kansas, and let's say you grow 10,000 bushels of wheat, you can sell all the wheat you want at that price. But your decisions to sell a little more or sell a little less will in no way affect the price on the market. Now, why is that? Because you're a speck of dust in a dust storm of supply. You're a drop of water in an ocean of supply. Your decisions to produce a little more, a little less, relative to the total output in the whole world for that good is just insignificant. It's nothing. So what would your total revenue be if you sell 10,000 units at $5 a piece? You're going to get 5 on the first, 5 on the second, 5 on the third. What's your total revenue going to be? 50,000. Remember, total revenue is price times quantity. And no matter how much quantity you're producing as a farmer, you're not going to change the price of wheat in the world. They're just insignificant. Are you with me? If every wheat farmer in the world produced more or less, would that change the price of wheat? Yes, that would. So there's a difference between the firm and the entire industry. 2 different things going on. Now, when you have that horizontal or infinitely or perfectly elastic demand curve, you should have this notes on elasticity. These 4 relationships hold true. The demand curve facing the firm is the marginal revenue curve. Now, what is marginal revenue? It's a change in total revenue. So for every extra unit Farmer Jones sells, the total is going to increase by what, $5? Whether he produces 0 or 10,000, every unit he sells in that gap is going to get him $5 more than the next bushel. Are you with me? His decision to produce more or less is not going to change the world price of wheat because he's a drop of dust. The dust storm was applied. Okay, so demand is marginal revenue, and that's going to be equal to the average revenue. We've already done this with numbers, and I was making shoes, flip-flops from the beach, saw me tying together. Okay. So how do you find an average? You go total revenue divided by what? Quantity. That's going to be equal to 5. With marginal revenue is equal to average revenue, average is unchanging. You all remember that? I think we use heights in the room. Right? The average height of the room is 5'6". Someone exactly 5'6" comes in the room. Does that change the average height of the room? No. Marginal is equal to the average. The average is unchanging. And it's going to be unchanging because the demand curve is elastic. Which then means that's the market price. So those 4 relationships hold true when these 6 assumptions are in place. This is an inventor. He wrote Risk, Uncertainty, Profit 50 years after he's finishing up this job. Now, if you look at the industry for a moment, right, or Farmer Jones in that industry, see, he's never going to charge under 5 because that's what the buyer says, I'll buy everything you got at $5 a bushel. He's not giving charity to the buyer, so to speak, so he'll take whatever's given. But if you're a farmer and you say, I want 501, we did this when we talked about elasticity. So you're putting a price tag at 501 on every bushel of wheat you sell. But every other wheat farmer in the world is holding up a sign, I'll sell at 5, I'll sell at 5. I'll sell at 5. Remember that? What's going to happen to you when the buyer, the grain elevator, sees your 501 sign? You're going to say, move your truck aside, get the hell out of here. Next, come on up. Why? Because there's 10,000 wheat farmers behind you selling the exact same thing at 5. Why would they buy yours at 501? You're going to say, move aside. You're going to sell nothing because you're off the demand curve, aren't you? Well, the maximum willingness to pay. So your total revenue went from 15,000 potentially to what? 0. If you're a farmer and you go into the marketplace and you try to charge a penny above what the market going rate is, you're going to sell nothing. That's absolutely true. We know that. No individual farmers will set their own price because there's too many of them out there producing identical goods. Now, a few last points here. These 6 assumptions for the individual firm versus the entire industry, the separation that he bases his whole book on. You might look at this and you say, well, what is this curve? Well, this is the long run average total cost curve. Now, we kind of did a little bit of this with just computing. What is your total cost? This is reviewing for your second test. What is your total cost? It's your fixed cost plus your variable cost. That adds up to your total cost. When you divide that by quantity, what do you get? Average total cost, right? Now your Gordian Strube textbook, when they go through this model, you'll see that bowl-shaped average total cost curve. There are technical reasons why it's falling over some range, flattening at other ranges, and rising. But I want you to tie this all together. When the market that means marginal is intersecting from the bottom. When the marginal is below the average, what's happening to the average? It's pulling it down, isn't it? When the marginal is equal to the average flattens out. It's the same. When the next unit, the marginal is greater than the average, what's happening? The marginal is pulling the average back up. That's all I really care to understand. The relationship between marginals, totals, and averages. I'm not going to make you do that graph. I used to make students do that graph, but they have subtracted all the different cost curves. Are you with me? Go to intermediate micro, they're going to make you draw that graph by week 3. Explain all that. Okay. So So when the margin's above the average, it pulls the average up. Okay? So now if you think about this for a moment, right? The revenue is $5 on every unit. And that is the golden rule for profit maximization. In fact, you should have it in your notes in a box with happy faces and arrows. Remember I said, golden rule. Profits are always maximized when those two are equal. Why? Because that's a break-even unit. That makes sense? If the next unit brings you more revenue than it costs you to make the next unit, your total profits are doing what? Rising if your revenue is above what it costs you to make it. And if your next unit brings you less revenue than it costs you to make it, aren't your total profits falling because you're taking a loss on those units? The break-even unit maximization is right there. I got those arrows there. Well, I'm putting that there. So notice the revenue is going to be, marginal revenue is $5 on each unit. That's unchanging. It's the prices. The marginal cost is right here. How your total cost is changing by an additional unit. So when the marginal cost is less than the marginal revenue, you're making profits on all this, aren't you? And you break even right here on that next unit. What about after that unit? Let's say you produce 10,001 units. What's your revenue on the next unit going to be? 5? Produce another unit, what's the revenue on that? 5, 5, forever, 5, 5. But notice it costs you more than 5 to make that next unit, isn't it? It costs you $5 and a penny to make it. But you're only going to get $5 on it. Or you take a loss on that bushel of wheat. So notice everything past this point. So if this is all profits, guess what all this is? Losses. So they're going to stop right here. Okay, so now we've tied 4, 5, 6 different concepts together, haven't we? From your prior notes, some of Megger's notes, we're going to go back to this. Now, Frank Knight then tells us there are 3 implications of the 6 assumptions of the perfect price competition. These are implications, what comes out of those 6 assumptions. 3 implications from the 6 assumptions of the perfect price competition. Implication number 1, productive efficiency. Productive efficiency. Now what that means, you put in parentheses, goods are produced at least possible cost. Productive efficiency. Goods are produced at least possible cost. Now where is that? Where's the least possible cost producing these units? It's going to be where? Right here. So firms are going to try to get down to here. And notice that's also consists of what? Profit maximization. So you have every incentive in business to get your cost down as low as possible to that break-even unit. All right. Number 2, allocated efficiency. Allocated efficiency. Now what that means is the right volume is being produced, the right quantity. Allocated efficiency. The right volume, the right quantity is being produced across that market. So we always like to say in economics about allocated efficiency. If a consumer values your product, the next unit, more than it costs you to make the next unit, you'll make the next unit. Now why? You're greedy, you're trying to profit maximize. You say, you're going to give me a profit to make that for you, I'm going to make it for you. We assume every firm is greedy, trying to make money. So what the consumers want and are willing to pay for, if that value is greater than the marginal cost of producing that next unit, it will be made. So we've got productive efficiency, goods are produced at least possible costs. Right? They're all trying to minimize costs. The right volume is being produced for firms and, of course, across the entire market. So that's number 2. And number 3, all the gains from trade are exhausted. All the gains from trade are exhausted. There are no deadweight losses. Remember I told you deadweight loss is going to come back multiple times in this course. Now what is the deadweight loss? Notice when I give you a concept, what's the definition? It's the gains from trade that are never made. See, once you understand those jingles, it all becomes easy. Now, when we went over the gains from trade, remember we went over Ricardo's law of comparative advantage? Hint, that's really test tube material. Now, when we went over this, what are those gains from trade? It's the area below the demand curve. That's what consumers are willing to pay above the price they actually pay. So all this area, watch my hand, all this is consumer surplus. Why buyers buy things. Then you had the producer surplus. See, the sellers are willing to sell maybe at this price, but they receive the market price. This unit, maybe they're willing to sell at this price, but they receive the market price. So the producer surplus is the area below that price, above the supply curve, out to the equilibrium. So you had all the consumer surplus plus all the producer surplus is your total gains from trade. We did Ricardo and comparative advantage, lawns and gardens, we put numbers to it. Now the time is back together. Now, if for any reason this market is not clearing, let's say there's a price, 501. Maybe Farmer Jones holds up the sign 501. And all the buyers say, move aside. Next. Aren't you going to have a surplus of Farmer Jones's wheat? There are going to be 10,000 bushels of quantity. Nobody buying at the price of 501 when everyone else in the world's selling at 5. Are you with me? Now, if every wheat farmer in the world held up the sign 501 simultaneously, would the world quantity go to 0? No. No, it's a downward sloping market demand curve. And then that quantity would be whatever that excess supply is at that price. Now we know from price theory what's going to happen when you have a surplus. The guys that are selling nothing now are going to have to do what? Lower their price to 5. Okay, and Menger gave us that, right? Surpluses push prices down, shortages push prices up. So if you think about it, let's say we have a price in the market 501. You have a short side of the market called X. The buyers stop buying right there at that price. Because at that price, the next unit is more than the maximum willingness to pay. So this is a deadweight loss. So this is consumer surplus and some producer surplus that never gets made. So it's efficiency that's not being captured. Gains not being exploited. Are you with me? That's called economic inefficiency, which economists universally hate. We hate wasted inefficiency. Can't stand it. There's no economist like this. Deadweight losses are just a pure drag on everything. Pulls everything down. Okay, so the gains from trade are always maximized only in one spot, the equilibrium. Shortages push prices up, surpluses push prices down, and everything is gravitating to that central tendency, the equilibrium. So we have 6 assumptions, 3 implications. Are you with me? So you want me to repeat all that one more time? I would check your notes right now, make sure everything is correct. 6 assumptions, large numbers of buyers and sellers. Number 2, free entry, free exit. Number 3, everyone is a price taker. The market sets the price. Number 4, perfect and costless information. Number 5, perfect and costless mobility of all resource inputs and outputs, or 0 transactions cost. Number 6, homogeneous goods, like goods. From those 6 assumptions, then we get this graphic. The firm, the demand curve facing the individual seller versus the demand curve across the entire market. Knight caught that. He said there are 2 different demand curves. There's the one that the supplier faces, and then there's the whole entire market demand curve, which is different, not elastic. Now you got 3 implications. Number 1, productive efficiency. Firms will produce output at least possible cost or the minimum point, the average total cost. Number 2, allocated efficiency, the right volume of outputs being produced at delivery. What consumers are willing to pay, that's more than it costs you to make it, you will make it. Because you're greedy and you're trying to maximize your profit, trying to get all as much money as you can. You'll do that out to this break-even point right here, which is right there at delivery. And number three, all gains from trade are exhausted. There's no deadweight losses in the perfect price competition model. Are you with me so far? It is impossible to pass this class without understanding this model. It's impossible to be an economist without fully understanding why this is so significant. I'm going to walk through this a little bit more. I'm going to give you some exercises here. Are you with me? Let's go through this. Notice I have this word underlined. What is that word? Price. Notice since Aristotle's time, what have we been trying to explain? Why are prices what they are? Now, it took a long time to get to the margin. Menger, Japanese, Ross gives the margin, that's what the margin is. To explain it. But notice in Menger, you had this range of equilibrium prices. Remember, and even on your exam, the first exam, when I gave you an auction model, I gave you a range because we had gone over this model. Now, Frank Knight's not going to be happy with that. He's going to say, I don't understand what ranges of equilibrium mean. We want to know where exactly the margin is scientifically. And he's going to give us this model to get at this. And I want you to notice something. A lot of textbooks, and this has been my gripe with a lot of textbooks, and a lot of economists, they'll say, that's the perfect competition model. Are you with me? So that's the perfect competition model. It's not the perfect competition model. It's the perfect price competition model. Now, you might think Racisi's just being nitpicky. Oh, no. This is all about logic now. It's science. When you think about this for a moment, right? There is no actual competition in the perfect price competition model. There's no actual competition. Now let's walk through some of these assumptions and you're going to see exactly that. Number one, which is 6 on your list, what is this? Homogeneous goods, right? Aren't all of these producers producing the identical same things? There's no innovation, no differentiation, no quality variation. It's all wheat is wheat is wheat is wheat. We're all producing wheat. So there's no actual competition there. Producing identical goods. Notice, everyone has the same cost curves in the industry. So there's no new technology where one firm has the technology and others don't. They're all using the most efficient technology economically possible. Are you with me? No competition there. They all have identical production systems, producing identical goods. There's perfect information. So information isn't scarce. Everyone already knows everything. Are you with me? Okay, so there's no advertising, strategy, marketing, none of that exists. Because you don't need any of that because everyone already knows what the price is. And notice they're all charging identically the same price. Everyone in that industry has the exact same price. See, and this is a kind of a problem of language. Because when most people think of competition, they think of an active verb to compete. Rivalry, a contest. You versus me. Who's better? Right? Strategies. And rearranging things and so forth. Yeah, that's what normal people mean by competition. That's not what's meant by that in this model. Because there is, write this down, there is no competition in the actual perfect price competition model. And it's not supposed to be in that model. I wish they wouldn't have called the word competition to the model. It's called the perfect price model or something, right? It would have caused less confusion. But notice what's on that y-axis is what? Price. That's what we're after. And you'll notice there's no graphs in Megger. But after Frank Knight, we're going to be using graphs even after Megger. Alfred Marshall does graphs. He's the first to use graphs in economics. And then Frank Knight comes along and says, wait a minute, to do graphs mathematically, geometrically, heuristically correct, you're going to need these 6 assumptions. So now let's walk this through. Why is this so significant when the assumptions are kind of absurd and unrealistic? It doesn't actually describe competition, but yet it's called the perfect price competition model. And if the person talking about it is sloppy, they just call it the perfect competition model, which is infinitely stupid to call it that. Now we're going to get into why. This will help. So we're going to have a little 10-minute digression. But it should pull all these pieces together and make all this understandable. Let's say I said to you in this class, you do not have to take any more exams or come to class or anything, but I'm going to give you a project to do applied research. Maybe you think, well, okay, and I said 100% of your grades on that project. The quality of your scientific research. And I'm going to give you a project. You're going to turn it into me at the end of the semester. And however good that is, 100% of your semester grade, forget about exams. Are you with me? Let's say you say, okay, what's the project? I say, okay, here's what my interest is. I want to know what the market price of shoes in Fairfax is. I want to know the market price of shoes in Fairfax. Now, if I tell you, you have to ask all your questions before you leave the room. After you leave the room, I do not have any more conversation with anything. I'm trying to get you to think like scientists. What would be one of the first questions you would ask me before you walk in? 100% of your grades is based on this. What would be the very first question you might ask me? What's that? Oh, until the end of the semester. That's when you have to turn it. Okay, someone else over there. What type of shoes? Good, congratulations. Yeah, you said, what kind of shoes? Professor, shoes are not shoes are not shoes. There's different kinds of shoes out there, right? There's athletic shoes, there's flip-flops for the beach, there's dress shoes, there's shoes for children, shoes for adults. What kind of shoes do you want us to measure the price on? I said, great question. Now we need to start focusing in. I said, okay. So now I'm going to tell you, okay, let's assume for the sake of your research, the only shoes I'm concerned about what the market price is for men's athletic shoes, size 8 to 10. 8 to 10. And I'll consider everything in that zone, men's athletic shoes, size 8 to 10, is identical interchangeable units of shoes. What did I do by assuming homogeneous goods? I'm drawing an x-axis, aren't I? Aren't these identical units of the same thing? And this is what? The price of any of those units. You can't have shoes and TV sets and apples all on the same x-axis. There's only one variable in the y-axis, the price of that thing. So we have to have homogeneous units. Do we assume that because we think all shoes are identical? No. In the real world, we know they're not. We assume it to do what? Draw an x-axis. Now we've got an x-axis of quantities of interchangeable homogeneous units of the same stuff. Now we're going to have the price, the barter prices, the relative price of any of those units. Are you with me? You can't have apples and oranges on the x-axis simultaneously. You've got to separate these out. Does everyone understand that so far? So what type of shoe? Let's say, okay, men's athletic shoes, size 8 to 10, I will consider interchangeable. We're not going to do Shaquille O'Neal size 26. We're not going to do baby shoes that are size 2, 8 to 10. It's okay for me. So now how would you do your scientific research? Well, you have to go out and measure those. So you're going to first go out to every shoe store in the city limits Fairfax that sells men's athletic shoes. You're going to go to Foot Locker. You're going to go to Athlete's Foot. You're going to go to Payless. You're going to Walmart and Target and all the places that sell shoes. And you're going to concentrate on what? That section that says men's athletic shoes. And you're going to look at size 8 to 10. Are you with me? That's what scientists do. You got to collect data. And you know what they're selling it at because they have a posted price. These shoes are, and you're going to record those prices. They're telling you what they're willing to sell the pair of shoes for, aren't they? And you're going to do a scatter diagram. These are discrete scatter diagram observations. So you've got that. Then you got to figure out what the buyers are willing to pay. You know how much the price is, but you got to figure out what they're willing to pay. And let's say when you're recording, you're at Target, and you're looking at these men's athletic shoes, and you see somebody shopping, and they go into that section, 8 to 10, and they look at a pair of shoes, and they put it in the basket. Okay, now you've got a customer. You say, I know how much you're going to pay, because I see the price tag. And I don't work here, so I'm not trying to get some information, so they're going to raise the price of the cash register. I'd just like to know how much you're willing to pay. I know what you're going to pay. But I know you value it more than that price, or you wouldn't be buying it. There's a gain to you. How much would you pay? Well, you got to assume they're being honest with you. They may not. They may say, "Oh, I'll pay $1 billion for it." You know, it's probably not true because their shoes are less than $1 billion. They're not buying, right? So here we go. So let's assume that they're being honest with that, and you're going to record those observations. They're going to put that information in the box. When you open the box, you're going to count all these, what people are willing to pay at what quantities. Are you with me? These are discrete observations. Now, so you see the scatter diagrams, and then you got to tell me what the market price shoes are. So you might say, well, it's kind of in there somewhere. So the equilibrium price is kind of in that range, and the equilibrium quantity is kind of in that range. Are you with me? Now, what grade am I going to give you for the quality of your scientific research? You're going to get an F because you didn't pay attention. Did I ask for a range of equilibrium prices? No, what did I ask for? One word. The equilibrium price. What is the market price? Which means one. Boil it down to one. I want to know what that price is. See, when you think about those auction models that gave you some kind of range of indeterminacy, you kind of know the margin's somewhere in there. You know the marginal quantities are somewhere in there. But that's not explaining exactly where that margin is. Are you with me? When you put these 6 assumptions in play that Frank Knight gives us, as he points out, graphs are the tools of math. And if you use the tools of math, you play by the rules of math. And these are the rules. These are 6 rules that have to be in place. And he says, when you do that, and you use econometrics, for near least squares regression, you're going to minimize the sum of square errors. Then that turns into a supply curve, and that turns into a demand curve. Are you with me, sir? Now we know where the equilibrium price is. It's not some range. It's exactly right there, right at this point. That's the equilibrium price. That's it. And so here we go. So the real world are these scatter diagrams, discrete observations. And we're going to turn those into supply and demand graphs. Are you with me? So where is the equilibrium price? It's right there. What's the equilibrium quantity? Right there. Now, a few last points on this. So we're using this as a heuristic device, kind of a visual aid. Sometimes pictures can tell you infinitely more knowledge than you can grasp logically. A picture tells you all the information. And this is the case of it. We know that if there's a surplus or excess supply in the market, which way does the price go? I'm going to prove that the price above equilibrium comes down center of gravity, right? If you have a shortage, which way does the price go? Goes up. Now we've isolated causation. Right there. It's not a little range. That's the answer. Now let's look at over here. Last few points. Let's say you're collecting data on the supply selling prices, and you see a consumer kind of walk right in the middle of that section. and they go to men's size 9 Nike shoes. That's athletic shoes. And they pick up a box of shoes and it says $29. Right next to it is the exact same pair of shoes, homogeneous shoes, right? And it has a price tag $49. So now the consumer's confronted with two different prices. Now what might a consumer do if they see one at $29 and one $49 for identically the same thing? They're going to check for quality, right? They're going to say, well, maybe they discounted this because there's a rip or a tear, maybe discoloration, maybe something. So the consumer's going to do what? Gather information. They're going to look at this, say, look at that $29 one, the stitching, the threading, everything you see. And they're going to look at the $49 one. You might look at this and might say, these are identical pairs of shoes next to each other with different price tags. $129, $149. They're homogeneous to that consumer, aren't they? Which one will the consumer buy? They're going to buy low, buy 29. And when you buy low, that pushes prices up, doesn't it? And in the limit, you could arbitrage and do what? Sell high. When you sell high, what's that do? Price pushes it down. So these 2 points, discrete observations, converge to this point on the demand curve. So the demand curve is a point of central tendency. Everything is gravitating to that curve. Right? If there's no transactions cost, the buyer could buy here and wait for the next buyer to do what? Resell it, make $20 gain, right? On that price spread. So notice where homogeneous goods come in. That's at x-axis. Okay. So every point on a demand curve is a set of equilibrium central tendencies. Where low prices are bid up to the regression equation, high prices bid downward to the regression equation. We call it demand curve. Same thing for a supply curve. So then we draw the supply and demand graphs. And this is the market's central tendency. Not just for an individual, but that's the overall market central tendency. And that's where the margin is. Breakdown gives us this. So now we're drawing supply and demand graphs, visually, geometrically, mathematically correct. Sounds like a very technical, esoteric type thing. Oh, this is enormously important. Enormously important. And we know from this basic underlying logic, shortages take that, disconnect, that chaos between quantity, supply, quantity, demand, and raise the price to the point of the market central tendency. Surpluses takes that excess supply, pushes it down to the point of central tendency. And so now we're drawing graphs. So then the question is, what is the what is the purpose of the perfect price competition model? Does it explain rivalry in a contest? No, not at all. There's no competition in that model. What it is doing is allowing us to take discrete observations, turning them into smooth continuous functions called supply and demand graphs, and now we can isolate causation exactly where that margin is. It's all about visual heuristics. Kind of teaching yourself a device, right? You see the picture, you see price too high, surplus, price too low, short. You know which directions these things move. There's an infinite amount of knowledge in just that little picture. Are you with me? We're going to relax every assumption and say, how does that change what the outcome here is? Are you with me? We're drawing graphs. We love to draw graphs. And price theory is what we're after, and it's on the y-axis. And you're going to need all 6 assumptions to be able to do that. There we go. Now, the flip side of the perfect price competition model, remember this is the perfect price competition model because we're really trying to isolate the price here. The flip side to that is monopoly. And we're going to first look at single price monopoly. So now we're going to relax some assumptions here. We're going to take Knight's contribution based on Menger's contribution. And now we're going to start relaxing more assumptions to get more explanatory. There are three assumptions of monopoly theory generally. You need to know what these assumptions are. Number one, and most important, there are barriers to entry. A barrier to entry. If there are no barriers, there's no monopoly. There has to be barriers. Number two, no close substitutes. No close substitutes. Can't substitute goods compete with each other? So you can't have substitutes. And number three, the monopolist cannot sell all they want at the market price. The monopolist cannot sell all they want at the market price without changing the market price. So they're no longer a price taker, they're a price maker. So in other words, the monopolist's decision to produce more or less will actually change the market price. See, the individual firm in the wheat market has no effect on the world price. But if you're the monopoly on that market and there's barriers to competition coming in, then your decisions to produce more or less will change that price. Because by definition, the monopolist is the market. So in other words, in a single price monopoly market, the firm does not face that kind of a demand curve. It's going to actually face the industry demand curve because they are the industry, so to speak. So their decisions to produce more or less will start changing that price. So let me show you how this looks. This is called the single price monopoly. Single price monopoly. We've relaxed an assumption of perfect price competition. What was that? The second one was what? Free entry, free exit. Where we said, well, what if competition not allowed to come? There's barriers. That then changes what? The price taker assumption. Now they're price makers. Okay, so here we go. The demand curve facing the monopolist is a downward sloping demand curve because they face the industry demand curve, not a horizontal. Then the question is this curve right here. See this curve right here? That's the marginal revenue curve. And we know the golden rule for profit maximization is the firm's always going to set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. That's the break-even unit. That's when you cannot make any more money. It's break-even at that point. So now let's walk this through. You might ask this question, why does the marginal revenue curve pivot away from the demand curve? Why does it pivot? That's really important for monopoly. And here's the reason. I'd write this down. You ready to start writing? The reason the marginal revenue curve lies everywhere below the demand curve for the single price monopoly, so you can abbreviate SP. The reason the marginal revenue curve lies everywhere below the demand curve for the single price monopoly because the single price monopoly cannot sell additional units of output without lowering price on previous units of output. Let me repeat this to you one more time. The reason the marginal revenue curve lies everywhere below the demand curve for the single price monopoly is because the single price monopoly cannot sell additional units of output without lowering price on the previous units of output. I'm going to give you some examples. I got numbers here for you. But I want you to remember this. When you go back to the perfect price competition model, Did Farmer Jones ever have to lower his price to sell more units? He's always going to get whatever the market pays him, $5, right? He doesn't have to change his price to sell more. He can sell all he wants and never change the price. But the monopolist actually faces that curve. He's facing this curve, not this one. So to sell more units, he's going to have to lower his price. But notice he's a single price. And that's it. He's got one price. It's a monopoly price for all of his units. So let's walk this through. Let's say I'm a single price monopoly pizza parlor in my town. There's barriers to entry. People aren't allowed to open up another pizza company, let's just say. Now let's say I have pizzas and I sell them $10 and I sell one. When the price is 10, I sold a quantity of one, right? What's my total revenue? Price times quantity total is 10. Change in my total is my marginal. It went from 0 to 10, so it's 10. Now, if I want to sell more units, I got to lower the price from 10, don't I? So let's say I have to lower my price to 9 to be able to sell 2 units of output. Okay, so when I have a price of 9, I'm selling 2. My total revenue is price times quantity is 18. So notice the change in my total is what? The marginal, which is 8. And why is it 8? See, watch me now, to pick up this rectangle right here, to pick up $9 on the second pizza, didn't I have to lower my price from 10 on the first to 9? It's 9 minus 1 is a net of what, 8? If you sell the additional unit, I had to lower the price. Because at 10, if I tried to sell 2, I'd be off the demand curve. What if I decide I want to sell 3 pizzas? Facing that demand curve, the most I'm willing to charge is, maybe we'll get away with is 8. So my total revenue is going to be 8, 8, and 8, right? 8 times 3 is what? 24. What's the change in my total from 18 to 24? It's a net of what? Marginal is 6. Now watch this. See, I picked up $8 of revenue on the third pizza, didn't I? But to pick up that $8, what did I have to do to the price of the first 2? I had to lower it from 9 to 8, didn't I? So I pick up 8 minus a net of 2, but it's going to be a net of gain of 6. We'll do one more. That's why I got these numbers. You're going to start to see this pivot. If I say I want to sell 4 pizzas, well, I can't get $8 for 4 pizzas because I'm off the demand curve. So my manager says, well, lower it to 7, and you'll sell 4. So when the price is 7, I sell 4. Total revenue is 28. The change in my total is the marginal, which is 4. So I'm picking up $7 on this unit. But I had to reduce my price from 8 to 7, 8 to 7, 8 to 7 on the first 3. So to sell an extra units to pick up 7, I had to lower this price to a total of 3. This is a net of 4. Does everyone see that? Now watch this. You see this pivot with you. You see the pivot here in numbers where marginal revenue is now below the price. So when the price is 10, the total revenue is 10, everything the margin is 10. When my price is 9, see P is 9, what's my marginal revenue? 8, notice it's below. Because I had to lower my price. When my price is at 8, I sell 3. So what's my marginal revenue when my price is 8? When my price is 8, what's my marginal revenue? 6. Price is here at 8, the marginal revenue is what? Down here at 6. That pivot begins. That's why that happens. That happens for the single priced monopoly. That does not happen for the perfect price competitor. Why? Because they're selling all they want at that price and can never change the price. The monopolist, by definition, is the industry. They are the market. And their decisions to produce more or less face that downward sloping demand curve. Marginal revenue deviates away from the price. Now there's major implications from this. Major implications. So what's the golden rule for profit maximization? Marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. So now we can then plug this in. I'll just give you a graphic here. We still got about 6 or 7 minutes. price, this is quantity. And we have the demand curve, like that. We have a marginal revenue curve for the single price monopoly. This is the marginal revenue curve. This is the SP, single price monopoly. Now we just got to put in a marginal cost curve. I'm going to make it horizontal for visuals. Now we know the golden rule. Marginal revenue equal marginal cost. We know in perfect price competition, it's going to be right here. Right there. Now let's look at this in single price monopoly. If this were a perfect price competition market, wouldn't the marginal revenue curve be the demand curve? Remember those four relations hold true? So what would be the quantity of output in a perfect price competition market? Well, it would be this amount right here. So that would be the quantity perfect price competition market. Now, logically, if you think about this, if you have a monopoly market, is there going to be the same amount of output as under competition or less output? It's going to be less output. So the monopolist is going to restrict output. Where does the monopolist, when that marginal revenue curve pivots to the left, this is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So here we go. This is the quantity. Single price monopoly. So notice what the monopolist does over perfect price competition. They're going to restrict output, right? Is that what you expect? So number one, so this would be monopoly versus perfect price competition. Number one, they're going to restrict output. You would expect monopolies to produce less output than under competitive pressure. Now, what will the monopolist charge? Well, in a perfect price competitive market, they're going to set price equal to marginal cost, where marginal cost equal marginal revenue. So this is going to be price, perfect price competition. Are they going to charge that price? No, because they've actually reduced the quantity in the market. They're not a speck of dust in the dust storm supply. They are the market. So here's what they're going to do. They're going to go up to the demand curve. See that? What's the most the market will pay? For all of my units, it's right here. Price, single price monopoly. So notice they're raising the price, aren't they? So number two, they're going to raise price. So monopolies should restrict output, raise price over open competition. We got just a few more pieces of this puzzle. Number three. Where would the consumer surplus be in perfect price competition? Well, if you think about perfect price competition, the consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve out to equilibrium above the price they actually pay. That would be the entire triangle. Now, what's the consumer surplus going to be? Area below the demand curve above the price they actually pay. So it's going to be all this area below my line out to here. And that's the price they actually pay. They're paying the monopoly price for every unit. So now this is the consumer surplus. So let me kind of mark that. Shaded area. That's the consumer surplus that's still left. If there wasn't any, they wouldn't be buying. So instead of getting the entire amount, they're getting this restricted amount. So would consumers like to buy from monopoly or open competition? Open competition, right? So consumer surplus is harmed. Because they got to pay higher prices and they get less quantities. Number four. What is this rectangle here? See, it's true that the consumer pays the monopoly price for every unit out to this. They pay this higher price for every unit. doesn't the monopolist receive the higher price? Absolutely. So here we go. We'll shade it this direction. It's called monopoly profit. Often called monopoly transfer, consumer surplus to the monopolist. So number 4, dollar for dollar investment. If I said I can invest you in 2 different industries, one that's a perfect price competitive market and one that's a single price monopoly. Ceteris paribus, which one would earn the higher rate of return? Monopoly, because you're charging higher prices, right? Yeah. So they're going to have abnormal, means above competitive profits. Be higher than under competition. And last, these visuals. Look at this area right here. Move in that direction. This is economic inefficiency. It's called the deadweight loss. So we would expect monopolies to be inefficient. Expect a deadweight loss, first discovered by